Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be looking at fogging and ULV machines today. We're going to discuss what the difference is. We're going to look a little bit into why particles matter, look at things like application rates, and how these different machines operate. We'll just do a little bit of housekeeping while everyone joins. Just to let you know, I can't see you, so as long as you can see and hear me, we should be good to go. And if you've got any technical problems, we'll discuss them shortly. Great to see a couple of hundred joining already today. Just a heads up that Natalie will be back next month on the 4th of August, where she'll be doing a webinar on writing the perfect pest control report, pest management report, sorry. So don't miss out on that one. The next digital forum is on the 19th of July. If you've not registered for that yet, head over to the BPCA website, look for the forums page, and you'll be able to register that online there. It's going to be a great summer holiday special, so come along. On the topic of digital forums, the Digital Forum 14 videos are now online. If you go and watch them back again, you can add your own CPD points for them. And that was a really good forum, so I recommend you do that. We recently sent out a survey regarding the event. It would be great if you could fill that in. It gives us a lot of help when we're planning our future events. And any submissions for that will be entered into a prize draw. So there is a chance of winning a prize for doing that for us. For anyone doing bird work, the Northern Ireland consultation process is still going ahead for the licensing. So if you're doing any bird work in Northern Ireland, I think the deadline for that is the 21st of July. So if you want to do any consultation and you work in Northern Ireland on bird work, go and head over to that. You can either contact us and we can put you into it. All the information is available on the website. For today, there is one CPD point available. If you have already registered, the point should be automatically added to your scheme. If you are watching this not live, so you're watching it back on one of the media platforms, then you can add your own points to your own scheme. But if you filled out your details today, then it should add them for you. There is a chat section. It's great to see so many of you using it. The variant in weather has been nice to see. We had an overcast morning. It's quite sunny now. So use the chat section, talk amongst yourselves. If you have any technical issues, put it in the chat section as well. And hopefully one of the team in the background will be able to help you with that. There's also a Q&A section. So at the end of the webinar today, we will be answering any sort of questions that you have, and I'll try and answer them the best I can. Good, so that's today. Just a heads up, the charity of the year for this year with the BPCA is Dementia UK, and if you can donate towards that, that would be great. It's an amazing cause, and the team have done some great work this year with various events and things. So it would be good if you can donate to that. Okay. Let's get this presentation up. Okay, here we go. So foggers and ULVs then. We're going to talk about foggers and ULVs today, and there are many options available for treatments for using foggers and ULVs. There's lots of variations in the market, and again, this will be different overseas. I'm going to try and give you a rundown. Just make sure I'm sharing. Yep. Try and give you a rundown today of the difference between foggers and ULVs and how they work and that kind of side of it. Okay, we will touch on thermal foggers. Thermal foggers is what you can see in this picture that's being used. These are commonly used for mosquito treatments. They produce this cloud of insecticide, which you can clearly see. It's more like a cloud rather than a mist. And the particles of hot foggers or thermal foggers are normally a lot smaller. So they stay airborne for longer and they can travel longer distances. There are also larger application machines. I think there's a photo at the end of the webinar on mist blowers. Again, these are more commonly used for large sites such as crops and fields and sort of landfill sites. Or large, like waste handling facilities. They're normally backpack mounted. They've got a large tank that's normally around 15 litres, and they project a product around 7 to 10 meters, so they cover a large area. So normally hot foggers, like I say, you can see this sort of cloud of insecticide, whereas cold foggers that we normally use in pest control, in public health pest control, with the particles being quite fine and it being a mist, it tends to be a little bit more harder to see. So we'll talk about that as we go through it. So the agenda for today, we're going to look at ULVs and fogging machines, and we're going to talk about the differences between them, how they work and things like that. We're going to look at particles and why particles matter, and then we're going to talk a little bit about application rates and calculating application rates and things like that are going to be in there as well. Okay, so ULVs and fogging then. So cold foggers and ULVs are what we most commonly use in public health pest control. It's normally done using air pressure, and commonly foggers and ULVs will both have a tank of fluid, and we'll talk about the different fluids that you can use later on, and an air pump. The liquid is blown through a nozzle, which turns it into a fine mist, and that's how it creates this fogging effect. So ULV started to be used around the 1950s, and this is when a lot of the research started to be done. They were first used on locusts, and since then it has become more increasingly popular in crop protection and public health pest control. A lot of research was done over the years, and it was all about particle sizes, and they were trying to answer the question: how do we make these techniques be effective with also as little impact to the environment as possible? So it was finding that balance. And they found that the smaller they could make the droplet particle size, also means that they're using less product. So if they make the particle size smaller, it uses less product to create that particle. But there's a balance, because particles that are too small don't work effectively. And I will talk a bit more about particles very soon. It's the next slide, actually. And in the UK, we have some machines that will say sort of ULV foggers, some that come under foggers. There is a ULV machine that is specifically, well, there's two actually in the UK, but one that we mainly use in public health pest control. Yeah, we're going to talk about all that as we go through today. And when you're looking at pieces of equipment for a job you're doing, always best to speak to your suppliers, have a discussion with them, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction as to what piece of equipment is going to work best for you, because everyone's needs are different. I have had both foggers and ULVs in the past. I work with both quite regular. So yeah, depending on how you want to operate them, depending on which sort of machine you will go for, there's quite a variant out there, and I'm going to touch on them as we go through it. So, difference between ULVs and foggers then. So we're going to talk about microns in this. 1,000 microns makes up a millimeter. So there are 1,000 microns within a millimeter, and a human hair is about 100 microns in size, just to give you an idea of that. So both of these machines will atomize a liquid, turn it into a fine mist, and we use that for insect control. Like I said, there is quite a big variation in machines. You get them in all different shapes and sizes. And we'll sort of touch on the differences. To keep it simple, I kind of put them under two categories. You've got the ULVs, and then you've got the foggers. And a ULV creates a set particle size. So in the ULV case, it's 15 microns. So every particle that comes out of that machine is 15 microns. Whereas a fogger, the particle size varies. So it's normally 60 microns or less. And typically with ULVs, with foggers, it's between 10 and 50 microns, the particle sizes. But like I say, ULVs come under one fixed size particles. Foggers, there is normally a variation of particles within there. Good. Okay, ULVs. So this gives you an idea of what particles come out and sort of demonstrates how it works. So as I mentioned, ULVs have this fixed particle size of 15 microns. Foggers have a mixed particle size. and it's commonly between sort of 10 and 50 microns in size that the machine will emit. Research into particle size found that anything less than 5 microns can be too small, and that tends to pass over the insect or just bounce off them, and they can stay airborne for quite a long time. Particle sizes that were too big, so greater than 60 microns, they don't stay airborne for very long, but also because it's a larger particle, it's using more product to create that particle. So this sort of range that we get now is the optimum. With ULVs, because every particle is the same size, everyone has a chance to be effective. And foggers has this variety of size. So the small ones and the larger ones, small ones may stay airborne for longer. The large ones may settle out quicker. So you can get this sort of varying of settling from them. And this has an impact when you're carrying out treatments, because they do have different sort of times as to how long you can be how long you can be out the treatment zone for before re-entering, and we will cover that. Okay, there are some ULV machines we're not going to discuss today. There is a small disc machine, and that's mainly used in crops. So you can put this machine in a field. It has a small amount of insecticide, they're normally about 1/2 litre tank, and it'll spin. It comes under the ULV because the particle size are all the same size. And as it spins, it can cover quite a large area. Normally one machine can do sort of like a whole orchard in treatment. We don't use them in public health pest control. It is mainly this machine. So I think this is the only one I'm aware of, which is the Exodus ULV machine, which makes it nice and simple to talk about. Like I said, there is that small disc one that is used in agriculture, but not so much in pest control. There are manual and automatic modes to this machine. And I will talk a bit more about that when we do the sort of discuss the setup of these machines, but you can have a manual mode where you turn it on, time the treatment and turn it off, or you can have an automatic mode where you basically set how long you want the treatment to be and the machine does it all for you. Because you don't have to be in the room with this machine, it is safe under COSH because you can just set it up in a room. You're obviously not going to be exposed to that product that is being used. You can put it in a location. So if you have a room with ULVs, it's done on treatment time, whereas a fogger, it's done on the amount of insecticide that you're going to use. So with a ULV, as long as you're treating a room up to 5 minutes in time, which I think is around 1,500 meters cubed, so quite a big space, you can leave that machine in one location and it will fill that full room with an insecticide. Depending on the products you use, there are different products on this, but that was sort of the standard size room. But 5-minute treatment time, you can leave it in one place. It has really accurate treatment times. So depending on the volume of the room, you work out how much insecticide you're going to use, and you're going to work out how long it'll take that machine to deposit that much insecticide. So something like the average bedroom in a house could only be a 10-second treatment. So it doesn't need to be very long to treat quite a large area. Like I mentioned, it does have short exclusion times, so a minimum of 1 hour exclusion time. Because the particles are all the same size, they settle at the same rate. So yeah, minimum 1 exclusion time, and then you've got to vent the area before re-entering. They do have a specialist bottle that fits onto the machine. So it's quite a funny shaped bottle. It's like round and then flat on one side, and that fits into the machine. And with a ULV machine, you can get insecticides, you can get natural insecticides. They do an odoricide, and they do a disinfectant for this machine as well. Like I say, it comes in a special bottle that fits the machine, and you can attach that to it. Foggers. Foggers, normally you fill up with an insecticide, so I put their multi-use products. By that, what I mean is, insecticides that you may have in your van may be able to be used in a fogger. Obviously, as long as it's approved so on the product label, and just make sure that you read that product label and make sure it can go through a fogger. Because they're multi-use, a bottle of insecticide that you might use for a wipe down treatment, say, on a different job, you may be able to put it through a fogger, so you can use them insecticides normally for different styles of treatments. These machines are normally handheld, and you can, as long as you've got access to a space and you've got a safe area to work, you can use a fogger. Localized treatments. So foggers normally have a throw of about 4 meters. That's sort of a figure that I took from a number of different units, so we're all around that number. But whichever fogger unit you purchase, it will have its own, obviously, standards that it will meet. So just make sure you're looking at it. But that's kind of the average is 4 meters. So as you're using this machine, it'll throw a particle sort of 4 meters from you. Electrostatic foggers, something that I think is quite new on the market. I've not worked with them when I worked in pest control, but these work in the same way as the previous fogger. So they take a liquid, atomize it into a mist. But as the product leaves the machine, there's this metal ring around the nozzles, and this adds a positive electric charge to each particle. So as it leaves, it adds a positive electric charge, and then that goes into the atmosphere. This could offer better coverage, obviously better surface contact with it being statically charged. It might stick to a surface better, and that would obviously hopefully help it work better, which would give you better economy for it. So there are these electrostatic units out there. So make sure you follow the risk hierarchy. Obviously, it's still really important when doing insect control that we follow this hierarchy and we're actually dealing with the reasons why they're there in the first place. If you're not dealing with the issue as to why it's there, you may just be masking the problem. Actually doing the treatment and finding that root cause together will give you a better result and stop the infestation hopefully returning. So when we're doing ULV treatments, just the same as any other treatment, we need to carry out that survey. Identifying the pest that you're going to be treating is really important. Once you've identified the pest, you can then identify the root cause. It will give you sort of the background to it, and I'll talk a bit more about identification in a minute. You need to identify any non-target species, or if there is risk to any non-targets. You need to undertake steps to prevent exposure to non-targets. So that's going to be things like pets. Can they be removed? Is there a fish tank? Normally it'll say on the product label, if you're dealing with sort of aquatic environments, what you need to do with them, if that product can be used in that environment. So just make sure that you undertake them steps to prevent exposure to non-targets as well. Survey the treatment for access. If you are using a fogger, it may be that when you go into a space, you need to make sure that space is adequate for you to be able to use that machine in there, and that you can safely stand and carry out the treatment. Like I say, select the correct control technique. That by assessing that access to, if you can use that particular control technique, then you need to select the appropriate one, and then work out your application rates. So your application rates with obviously the products you're using, you need to know how much product you're going to apply into that location, and we will talk about application rates as well into some depth. So I've just picked out fly species for these. A lot of the products that you can use through foggers and ULV machines do treat crawling insects as well. They may have different application requirements. So if you're treating crawling insects, just make sure you are reading the product label. But like I say, I picked these because they all have sort of a different background as to their root cause. So cluster flies, their larvae, their eggs are laid into soil. The larvae will parasitize an earthworm. It will stay there until it pupates into an adult, and the adult is what normally returns to a property. Commonly, when I've done cluster flies in the past, they've returned to the same property year on year, and it may be that you have to treat that property as them cluster flies, come into the property in the autumn and then leave again in the spring. Common house flies, normally associated with rotting vegetable matter and animal feces, is a common house flies. Lesser house flies are poultry units. You get large numbers in sort of poultry units. The male of the lesser housefly will migrate large distances. and the females tend to stay close to a food source. Lesser houseflies are quite easy to identify because they'll fly in that sort of triangular pattern, and they'll fly maybe 20 or 30 centimeters and then make a very acute turn. So keep an eye out for that. If you find common housefly and lesser housefly in a EFK, it's difficult to tell the difference. The lesser housefly doesn't have a bend in the vein of its wing. So if you look at the wings of a common housefly, you follow the veins along the wing, and at the end it'll have like a tick. So it'll have like a bend in that last little bit of the vein in the wing. Whereas a lesser housefly doesn't have that. Okay, blue bottles. These are going to be mainly in carcasses, meat, or offal. It can be fresh, but sometimes, older decomposing meats, they will infest it as well. You will get blue bottles that will cluster in a property. So if you go into a loft space and you disturb them, sometimes you can have cluster flies in there. Disturb them, you're like, why is there a few blue bottles in there? But they will sort of cluster together within a property as well. Fruit fly, these are going to be in rotting vegetable matter, fruit, sour milk, beer is quite a common one in pubs. So finding the root cause for them obviously is going to be massively important to stop it sort of being a reinfestation if you don't deal with the source. Mosquitoes are aquatic. The eggs are laid into water. The larvae are an aquatic animal. They live in the water until they pupate and the adult emerges. Normally feeding on nectar, and the females require a blood meal for egg production. Biting midge, similar. They're not strictly aquatic. They do prefer a damp area, but again, finding that damp area, you can then remove it. Normally with sort of mosquitoes, it's things like water troughs that are open, or if they're storing something that can catch water, like large plastic drums, storing them outside, they're filled with water, you can then get mosquito larvae in there, which obviously can cause a problem. Simple things are just removing that water. We did a site many years ago where we actually stacked the barrels on their side rather than stood them up. That prevented the water from stagnating there. It stopped them having mosquito problems. And then we've got the sewage fly, again, breeds in fungi, algae, bacteria, and sludge. They live in sort of the top layer of sewage, and that's where they tend to thrive. Like I mentioned, there are products available for crawling insects in both ULV and foggers. Just make sure that you read the product label regarding the application times for them, as sometimes they can vary. Okay, application rates then. A bit of math involved in this. So you need to work out the cubic meterage of the room that you're going to treat. Once you've got the cubic meterage of that room, sometimes it's in feet. So whether you work in feet or meters, you might need to convert that into one or the other. But all the ones that I'd looked at are in meters. So just keep an eye out for that. But you've got to work that out. So how do we get the cubic meterage of a room? You need to take the length, times it by the width, and then times it by the height. So I picked a room size of 10 meters by 10 meters by 2 meters high. It's maybe a smallish industrial unit sort of size. So total size of that is 200 meters squared. And I've split into ULVs and foggers. So the ULVs is 100 milliliters of product per 1,000 meters squared, and the machine will give out 36 milliliters per minute. So you need to sort of know that information. Again, this is just from one product that I took from a ULV machine. The others may vary slightly. So just check that with application rates, but just for this demonstration, I picked one. So dosage rate. So we need to work out how much insecticide we're going to use. So you take 200 meters cubed, you times it by 100, which is how many milliliters per 1,000 meters squared, and then divide it by 1,000. So that'll give you 20 milliliters of solution. So that machine is going to use 20 milliliters. Now with the ULV machine, like I say, it's a timed treatment. So you need to work out how long that treatment will need to go for it to emit 20 milliliters of fluid. So to do that, you do 20 milliliters times 60, which is 60 seconds in a minute, divided by 36 milliliters a minute, which gives you a time of 34 seconds. So for that quite large space, it will only require a 34-second treatment. and you're only going to use 20 milliliters of product to carry out that treatment as well. With a fogger, it is slightly different. Foggers, normally they have on the product label, it will say, like in this case, 1 milliliter per meter square. So you just need to work out how big your room is and then times that by how many milliliters per meter square you have. And in this case, it gives you 200 milliliters. So for the fogger, for that same space, you'll need 200 milliliters of solution. Now, because there's no timer on that, some machines are at different rates and it's a different particle size. You just put 200 milliliters into your fogger and then use that. Once you've used all that product, that should be enough to fill that void space that you are treating. So that's application rates and how you work them out. When you get a ULV machine, there is a booklet that will come with it, and it has all this information in there, and it's laid out in a really good form. This just gives you a breakdown of how you work out them dosage rates. The other thing you get with the ULV, when I was talking about times, and a good way to check it, so it was 200 meters cubed, so it was twice as much as this 100 one, and it was 17 seconds on the chart. Double it 34 seconds, which is what we got on our calculation. So that works out. This is a much bigger chart. It has more products and it also has costings on there. But I just wanted to show you that with the ULV machine, it gives you a room size, and then it'll give you how much ULV product you're going to use and how long that treatment will be. So there is this handy graph that comes with it, just to make it a little bit easier. So set up them for foggers. They're both very simple machines to use. In this case, for this fogger, I picked this one just because it has sort of all the features that I've seen on foggers before. So this kind of covers it all. You will need a power supply. So with both machines, you'll need to plug it in somewhere. So be mindful of that when you're doing your survey and look for power supplies. On this particular machine, it's got a large opening on the front, which is this large white cap. You take that off, and that is where you put your insecticide. There is an on and off switch, which is on top of this dome, and that is just a on and off switch. You then have this pipe where the insecticide comes out of, and at the end you have a nozzle. And on a lot of machines, these nozzles are adjustable, and it'll have a few different settings. One of the old machines that I used to have, I think it was all the way off, was obviously off, and then if you went 3 turns open, it would be 35 micron size application. So if they've got an adjustable nozzle, normally it'll either have a setting or it'll tell you how many turns to turn it to emit a certain particle size. And in the information booklet for foggers, it will tell you sort of the optimum sizes that you should be using. So that's fogger setup. Like I say, quite simple. These are designed to be operated on a level surface. So put them on a level surface while you're filling them up and things. This one's quite good because it has a large opening, but I'd still recommend using a funnel because they can be quite difficult to fill up sometimes. So use a funnel when filling these, and it'll hopefully prevent any spillages. And if you've got a spill kit, have it handy by just in case. Okay, ULV machine setup then. This is slightly different. On the switch, it'll have 3 settings. It has an automated setting, an off, and then a manual setting on the other side. The manual setting is as simple as you work out the application time, you turn it on, you time that treatment, you turn it off, and that's that treatment done. Obviously, if you're in the room while the product is being emitted, you'll need the appropriate PPE, so make sure you check that on the product label. With a ULV machine, they also have an automated system, and this can be like 1 day, so it's a delay timer for when the treatment goes off. So you can set a treatment to go off for 1 day, or you can set a continuous treatment where it'll treat a space at the same time for 9 days continuous. And you can set that up. Now, when you're setting up the timed operation system, on the bottom of the machine, so at the bottom of this frame, you will see a plaque. And in the bottom right-hand corner where it says timer pin number on the presentation, there's a 4-digit code. And you use that 4-digit code to set the timer on the machine. The instruction manual is really clear. It's dead simple to do. I've used a ULV machine when we was treating a pub, and I went, set the machine up when the pub closed. And then the treatment happened early hours of the morning. Went back the next day, just had to pick the machine up and vent the space, and that was all fine. So it is a handy feature, especially if you want to do treatments where you don't want to be in the room while the treatment's going off, or if it's like a really long treatment. I did a warehouse once, which I think I remember the treatment time. I can't remember how big it was, but it was 11-minute treatment, and we had 2 machines on that um, to treat that area. So yeah, they are handy, and like I say, you can set them on a timer. So make sure these foggers and ULV units are well maintained. And when we look at chemicals, there are a lot of factors that are going to influence the chemical that you're going to select and in the location you're going to treat it in. Some are appropriate for, say, places that handle food. Some may not be. So just make sure that you are checking them product labels. It's all about finding that balance of application that's suitable for the location, that's allowed on the product label, and also following COSH and wearing the correct PPE. So you've got to find that balance when you're carrying out your treatments. Every job you treat will be different. So you will need to read them product labels to make sure that product is approved for that location. Make sure you follow the product label. Again, that is a legal requirement that you follow the product label. Only use the amount of insecticide in the area you're treating. So work out your areas, work out how much insecticide you need, and only use that amount of insecticide in that location. Avoid storing insecticide in the machines. With a lot of stuff we use, especially the oil-based insecticides, I used to have a bit of problem with rubber seals and things where the oil would degrade the rubber seals. So just make sure you're not leaving insecticide in these, especially with the ULV machines. You can take that bottle off, put the lid back on, and store it separately. And with a fogger, if you just put in the machine what you need to use, you use that, then it shouldn't have any insecticide within that machine. PP and RPE, make sure you are wearing the appropriate RPE and PP for the job you're doing, and following that product label for them requirements for that. Okay, just a little bit on problem solving then. There's not many things that can go wrong with these, and they're not common. But just in case you do have any, these are sort of the things that you may come across. With ULV machines, they have a clamp that holds the bottle on. Sometimes if you've used it a lot, that clamp can come a little bit loose. It's dead easy to make that clamp tighter. And there is a really good video on YouTube already on how to tighten that clamp up. There is a little rubber ring inside the receiver fitting of the bottle, so up in the neck where the bottle goes. The machine that I had, and I think it still does, but they came with a spare set of seals anyway, so you can replace that if you need to. And the products itself, because ULVs have a special product within its own bottle, if anything's happened to that product, it may be that is causing a problem. So just check that. With foggers, fill up the machine. Like I say, use a funnel. Do it on a level surface. It should reduce any issues with filling them up. ULVs have a brushed motor inside them. And it may need to have a motor repair if them brushes fail. They normally last for quite a few thousand hours. So it's not a common thing, like I say, but it might be, if you turn it on, there's no motor there, that might be the problem. And again, rubber seals, with us using oil-based insecticides, it may be sort of rubber seals might perish and they may need replacing. I mentioned earlier about disinfectants. There are odorizers, like I said, that you can use in these, and there are disinfectant products. I know it's been quite common with COVID that places started to use foggers and ULVs to carry out treatments or carry out disinfectants, sorry. So you can get disinfectant products for both. And this was that mist blower I was talking about. Like I say, they're normally backpack mounted, and they're good for covering a large area. Excellent. I am done then. Is there any questions? I'll just stop sharing this. Cool. Any questions? Okay. What are the drawbacks using cold foggers for treatment of cockroaches in restaurants? Is it at all is it legit at all? If there's a product available for crawling insects that covers cockroaches, then yeah, it will work. I think there was a video of someone doing a fogging treatment for cockroaches, maybe in the States that was, and it worked quite well. When you watch the video, actually, at the end of it, you can see some cockroaches still running around that have either not been treated or have potentially got resistance to the product they were using. But yeah, if there is a product available for cockroaches, then it could be something you could look at. Okay. Would you recommend covering PCs, TVs that have cooling vents at the rear when fogging an office or domestic property, for example? Anything you can cover like that where stuff's not going to get into it could be helpful, especially like cleaning up and things. You can sometimes get like a bit of residue, especially if you're using um, foggers and you're going around a room, you might get a little bit of residue on there. So covering them might be helpful as long as they're not obviously infested with anything, because that's just going to allow them to be reinfested. But yeah, especially things like speaking with commercial customers and homeowners about fire alarms. It may be that you might need to cover them. If you're carrying out your treatment, just so they don't set the fire alarm system off. Okay. Why is there no professional certification training for ULVs and foggers? Yeah, I don't know really. I guess when you're using like PA6 and PA9, I've not done the course, but I'm assuming that's more outdoors kind of treatments. So it might be because ULVs and foggers are commonly used indoors. It might come under different regulations, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. That would be sort of my educated answer. Have you noticed any problems with staining using oil-based products indoors? I haven't, but I've read things before where if like it's been applied too close to a material and it's gone on quite thick, maybe that has caused a problem. But I've never had a problem with oil-based products indoors anyway. And I've used quite a few for certain treatments in various locations and not noticed anything. Sort of prices for foggers and ULVs. Not something I'm going to get into on prices. Like I say, go speak to your suppliers. They will be able to give you products and prices, and obviously like running costs and things like that. But speak to them, and they will be able to give you all that information. It's not something I sort of get involved with, just because I'm more on the working side than the distribution side. Who enforces any breach with non-compliance to the product label? Yeah, HSE will probably be the ones that deal with them. They have like biocidal product regulations and control of pesticide regulations all come under the HSE, so they'll probably deal with that. Thermal foggers effective against flies. I have never used one against flies. I've seen mist blowers used for flies, but I've not seen thermal foggers are used for flies. Like I say, normally it's mosquito treatment for thermal foggers. The particle sizes are quite small, normally sort of 5 to 20 micron sort of size, depending on the machine that you're going to use. But yeah, I'm not sure if a thermal fogger would be effective against flies, but you can do your research, speak to your manufacturers. They should be able to help with that. Benefits and drawbacks of ULVs versus foggers. I guess they both have lots of positives. Like I say, I mentioned about the things that you may need to look at if you have a problem with either machine, but they both have lots of advantages. Obviously, ULVs and foggers, and I've used them both in places I could use both. So if it was a space where I could use a fogger, I've used a ULV in the past, and places where we've used ULVs, I've used foggers in the past. So they do have a bit of overlap. I think they're both great systems. I guess it comes down to how the jobs you're doing and how you operate as a business as to which one is sort of most appropriate to you. Dealing with multi-level office space is often in excess of 100,000 meters cubed. It's all going to come down to how many rooms you can treat in one time. So you're probably going to have to section it off for your treatments, work out the application rate for maybe one floor, for instance, or one set of offices. And then you'd have to treat that sort of area before moving on. Large spaces are quite difficult. Like I say, we did a large warehouse where we had multiple machines, and that worked really well, and it was a really successful treatment. But yeah, depending on the size of the offices would depend on sort of which way you'd go with it. Is outdoor fogging and ULV allowed in the UK? There are mist blowers that are for outdoor use, and obviously thermal foggers, as you saw in that picture at the first one was being used outside. They still do a bit of this on crops and things, from what I'm aware of. So yeah, there are products that can be used outdoors if you are doing treatments, things like flies and things. If you're doing them, on landfill sites, there may be application techniques that you can use there for sure. Precaution for loft spaces with water tanks. Depends on the product. If it says cover them, then you need to cover them. Some it may say that as long as they're sealed, it is fine. But yeah, read the product label. It'll tell you what to do with water tanks. With the fogger that emits a positive charge, I think there is you can't use that around like gas source and things like that, because obviously it's a positive charge particle that's being emitted into the environment. So just be mindful of that. It was my understanding that a fogger is a thermal fogger creating a smoke formulation, and ULV a misting machine. All units shown is ultra low volume sprayers or misting. Is it correct to make a statement? So I asked this question, Brian, what is what? A ULV is a fixed particle size. So it has one size particles and it emits it all. A fogger will emit a variety of particles, normally from 10 to 50 microns is kind of the common across a lot of the machines. Thermal foggers are slightly different. They emit a very small, which is more like a smoke than a mist. And thermal foggers is normally sort of between 5 and 20 microns from the sort of machines that I was looking at. Not something I've done a lot of thermal fogging, but that is the difference. ULVs, when you look at the definition of ULV, it says anything that emits a fine spray. But as machines goes, ULV is a fixed particle size, and foggers is a variation of particle sizes. Can you use foggers in an area where you are going to use the same application, say a Gloria sprayer? It will have a dosage rate on it. So if it says using a fogger at this dosage rate, then you can use it at that. You can't then like double dose that product with a sprayer. You can only use the amount of dosage. It depends on where you're treating, depends on how you're going to use it. So if you go into a house and it's a carpet that's got flea infestation, as your question, it's fleas in a domestic property, then I'd suggest that it's probably better to spray the carpet than using a fogger, because they're going to be in the carpet anyway. The larvae live in the carpet, which is the bulk of the infestation. Only 5% of flea infestations is normally in adult form. So the bulk of the infestation is going to be in the carpet. So you'd probably just be better using a spray rather than a fogger for that one. Good. Okay. Oh, press them now. Good. I think that is all the questions for that one. Yeah, I've got no more in here. Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one. Natalie's back on the 4th of August. So we'll see you there. Thank you very much. Bye.